Good afternoon. I'm here with my guest, poet, writer, literary activist, Timothy Gager. It's been a while since you've been on, Tim.
A couple of years. Nice to see you.
More than that, hasn't it? Oh, no, your last novel.
2014.
Yeah. So I'm going to read a brief introduction to Tim. He's the author of 13 books of short fiction and poetry, including 2 novels. And I think years ago I published, what was the name of your book again?
Shutting Door and Same Corner of the Bar?
Same Corner of the Bar was your first book of poetry, wasn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. And including 2 novels. He has had over 400 works of fiction and poetry published, of which 11 has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize. His work has been on National Public Radio, and he has hosted the very successful Dyer Literary Reading Series in Cambridge. It's out at the Audible Gallery in Central Square. You should check it out every 3rd Friday, is it?
First Friday.
For every first Friday. Who's coming up, by the way?
Kitty Beers and David Winter are going.
I know Kitty. I've had Kitty on the show. She does environmental sort of stuff, global warming, science fiction, and all that.
And David's will be his first. Kitty's been featured there before, and it's David's first time. And there's always, open mic, and it's 7 to 8:30. It's much quicker than it used to be, and it's a great series. It'll be 17 years in February.
Unbelievable. That's
200 months in November.
But before I go into Tim, I just want to make a quick thing of my new book of poetry from the Gray Sparrow Press. Last night at the Worst House, inspired by that long defunct bar and eatery in the heart of Harvard Square. Hope you take a look at it. It's on Amazon. Anyway, we're going to be talking about Tim's writing, and his latest book is Jay Strongbow Is Real. So I was going to ask you, Tim, we know wrestlers as comic figures. It's not
theater.
It's theater and comic also. I mean that run around, Sergeant Slaughter and all this stuff.
Some people believe it's real.
I know. Well, anyway, so how can a wrestler, wrestler is mostly show business, sort of comic book feature, make for serious poetry? I mean, you made it into serious poetry. I'm not saying you didn't, but you used this sort of unlikely figures of this wrestler.
It's interesting for me how I came up with it, because the one sentence title, Chief Jay Strongbow Is Real, is really kind of loaded based on, this day and age, what is real in the news, what is fake news, and the question is wrestling real or is wrestling fake? And and Chief Jay Strongbow was played by an Italian, Joey Scarpa, and he wasn't even Native American. And if you tie that into like what happened with our country, how that we imperialize, how we take and then we kind of lie about it. This is, for America. This is who we are, and we're the greatest country of all time. I mean, what is real in any of that? I think we question a lot this day and age about what is real and what isn't real, and what to believe and what to believe blindly.
Mm-hmm. And so how does this fit in with Strongbow, for instance? This Indian character.
The tie-in is Native American land as well. I'm not Native American, but I do have a sense of respect to what had happened and how early America just kind of took the Native American land and kind of pushed them further and further. And that's the real story.
Oh, okay. Have you ever any Chief Black Elk speaks any of his stories of the Indian tribes and things like that?
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't.
Oh, okay, yeah. Laurie Cherry, in a review for Boston area Small Press and the Somerville Times, wrote that you have a tendency to explode myths. What is that about? Why do you feel? Or maybe you don't agree with her. I don't know.
On the way over, I was tempted to be like, how would Bill Belichick answer that question? Bill would say, well, I didn't write the review, so you'd have to ask her. But
you were anticipating this very question?
No, I was not. But Laura's been, Laura's known my writing for years, which is a real advantage of someone that can know you and know where you're going and even the changes within your writing. So if I could speak to her, I've exploded various myths. I kind of, with writing and with language, I like to expand and stretch and go as far as I can. I mean, certain myths tend to be very closed in general, and you can kind of blow the doors off the truth of them or the fallacies within them.
Don't we need sort of myths? We have myths of our own lives, myths of our country to survive, do you think? I mean, sometimes we have to create our own myths.
Exactly. And I mean, if you really want to go further and be controversial, you can say that certain religious beliefs are mythical, but very often they have to be in place. I mean, people really have to believe in something.
Okay. Now, tell me a bit about this Chief Strongbow. What a little background of the guy.
Well, I mean, I remember being a kid and watching pro wrestling, and this is the heyday of pro wrestling, and I was always followed by the roller derby. But Chief Strongbow, he used to come out, and he's probably one of the biggest racist gimmicks of all time in anything.
Was he a racist himself?
I can't even answer that question. I know he played the role. He wasn't Italian, and he'd come out in the full headdress and the big boots with the fringe in them, and he would go into the ring, and he'd always start out the matches really, really quickly and get a few shots in and dance around to the war chant, and then, true to the script, in the middle to the end of every fight, he just would take a licking, and he would be down. They'd be pounding on Jay, and
sort of like history, huh?
And then he'd rally. He'd be this slow rally, he'd be crying, and it'd be like he'd be coming to life, and then he would end up victorious. And they would say the tomahawk chop and the sleeper hold.
He would become victorious?
He would become victorious. He was a very popular figure. So popular that even when he was in his long past his physical prime, you couldn't believe he could win any of these. He was like this roly-poly, no muscle tone guy, but he was Chief Jay. He was win. The Native American would win each time. Very popular.
So again, that's sort of, that's, you can say it was racist, but in some ways, the Indian is winning, right?
Well, people want that. They want to believe without being sensitive or without any thought. They want to believe what they want to believe. I mean, the Cleveland Indians had, or the Atlanta Braves had Chief Nakahoma, who would be in the full, Native American garb. And, every time the Braves hit a homer, he would dance around his teepee. And, what else can we do? It's kind of like, dress as a Indian squaw for Halloween. It's like...
It brings to mind that short story writer, very famous, is with Hanging Loose, who's an Indian writer. Do you know who I mean? I'm trying to remember his name. I forget about this. But, okay, so now you write about sobriety as one of your poems, and you've had a long bout, and you're now on the wagon and all that. You make no bones.
I never understood on the wagon, off the wagon. Never understood the wagon at all.
Yeah. Well, I guess they used to throw drunks on paddy wagons or something like that.
Exactly. I don't know if, some of the drunks I knew probably wouldn't be thrown very easily into that paddy wagon, but yeah.
But I really like the poem. I was going to say that it's sort of like you had a painting in there, and the brush strokes and all the brush strokes to complete the painting was sort of aligned with the brush strokes that you would need to fix yourself and be a complete picture. Do you keep making those strokes now?
Yeah, it's like it's never finished. The work in recovery is never finished, because if you slip up in your recovery work, you can relapse very easily. I can relapse very easily myself, and I have to be really, really stick with my program, very attention, detail oriented, just to catch myself where I might slip up, where I might not be acting or behaving in a certain way, which could lead me to a bad relapse.
Okay.
And in terms of the brush strokes, you just it's kind of with a painting too. It's a marathon rather than a sprint. It's the slow, calm painting of it. It's not like you're not. I mean, when I was drinking, it was probably more like you know, you have a big blank canvas and you have a gallon of you know, Sherwood Williams, and you just throw the whole gallon on the canvas and you're done.
Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
Right, right. Well, I love that poem, and others, of course. You know, you have a lot of humor in your work, and I work in McLean, and you work in social service. So I was reading about, Freud said that punning and humor is a form of aggression. Do you find that as
I'm surprised that question.
Yeah.
Because I always heard that puns and humor was a sign of intelligence.
Well, that doesn't preclude intelligence, does it? No.
So does that mean intelligence is aggression?
Could be. But
Well,
what do you
know
think?
what? Freud was a brilliant man, but I don't adhere to all of his theories and all of the you know, subconscious and what people really are thinking, what they really want to do, and that's why they're imbalanced.
Well, why do you employ a lot of humor? What does it do for your work? And your whole life is full of, you're very witty, and you know, you comment on things in a very witty fashion. But in your work, you use it well. So I don't know. Maybe give us a little insight to it.
I think that if you're generally, if you're a funny person, you can. It's same with all types of writing. If you work on that aspect of it, eventually it will come through. But that's, you know, you have to kind of work its way in before you can fully develop here to the page. In terms of my own humor, I needed that when I was growing up. It was a way for me to get attention, for me to make everything seem all right. It was probably, it was covering up a lot of feelings, the inability or the not wanting to show feelings. I could always cover it up with a quick joke or a gag or.
Okay.
But now it's just humor. Like I have other, obviously, devices that I use to take care of myself. But you know, the humor still comes through, and it's always funny to have like certain situations and to expand on them. Or
Okay. I remember on Facebook recently, you bemoaned the fact that it was hard. People didn't answer you for readings, and you were frustrated with this fact. It's the plight of the indie writer. How do you address this? How would you advise people new to this to get some publicity, to make some inroads in that regard?
Find out where Dyer Literary Series has become more of an independent writers type of series. At first it wasn't like that at all. But I think indie writers are looking for places to read.
And you think there's not a receptive audience for that, or you know, bookstores, et cetera, et cetera? What do you think in general?
It depends on the bookstore. It's hard to really generalize, but you really have to go and do your research and don't give up and find out. You know, if you're writing, you're serious about writing, you'll find out people that are on the same plane that you're in, and find out where they do readings. A lot of people approach me through email. They've heard of the Dyer Literary Series, and that's how I book my guests now. I very rarely, unless I need to fill a third slot or I have a vacancy, do I do the looking.
Well, you've created something there. Yeah. But why were you frustrated? I mean, a guy with all, you know, everyone knows you, your work is all around there, you've been at this for years. Why do you think you were experiencing difficulty?
You know, my sick mind came up with very many theories about it. And some of them are crazy, and some of them are, but maybe there's a little bit of the truth in there. I think there's a lot of series now that you have the serious series with a serious writer with the big name publisher, bookstores. That's great. But the indie series that, you know, I'd read at many bookstores myself, but the series that I was always kind of have the most fun at, they seem to promote everything but the writer. It's always like drinks, and poetry. Or like, you know, costume party and book reading, or music and book reading.
They got to get people in, right?
And obviously that's the way, and I don't know if I fit the hip demographic anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, when I first started having books, I was probably younger. Obviously I was younger and hipper. But it's hard, and it's really, I mean, I have a lot of gratitude for getting the gigs. You know, I'm so thankful for getting it. But you know, very often it's My frustration is that it takes a lot to approach somebody, and you're not groveling, but you're asking, like, will you accept me? Will you accept my book? Will you accept me for a reading? Can I travel halfway across the country for 15 minutes? And when people don't even get back to me, it's kind of like, I don't take it personally, but it's more of an in general thing. Like, you should have the courtesy to get back to me. For the Dyer series, basically you have to have a book to feature. That's sort of my guideline. Otherwise, it becomes too subjective. I like you, I don't like you, I like your work. And it's too much work for me. So if you got a book, you got a shot at being a feature at the Dyer. And so that way, if someone reaches out to me, either I'll give them the gig or I'll always respond. I will absolutely always respond to them. Like, this is what we want, and invite them. If you don't have a book, why don't you show up? Show up, you can read in the open and see what you like. And so many people that have read at the open that hadn't had books yet ended up featuring for me. It's a very welcoming series. And the open mic is great. It's never like it's like the step down. There's no real step down. I mean, I've been to open mics across the country, and there is a step down. But hey, we're in Massachusetts. This is a literary hub. You're either have a book or you're working your way to having a book. And the people in that reading the open mic are just great. I think it's the greatest open mic.
Okay. Now, you took a break from poetry for a little while, right? And you were doing mostly concentrating. What brought you back to poetry?
Harris Gardner. I blame Harris.
Oh, yeah. Well, he inspires a lot of people.
Like all of my writing, I'd written 2 novels in a row, which were received very, very well. And I'm very proud of that work. And every year Harris runs the
Boston
National Poetry Month Festival at the Boston Public Library. And Harris is gracious enough to ask me to read there. And so when he read, and this year I was like, in 2015 I read some new stuff. In 2016 I had a couple new poems. In 2017 I hadn't written anything no poems in the previous year. So I said to myself, when Harris Gardner asks me, I'm going to graciously turn him down. And so, February rolls around and Harris calls me, and Harris is like, Tim, do you want to read at the festival this year? And I'm like, yes, of course. And I'm like, uh-oh, and I need to write some poems. I don't want to present the same old stuff. So some of those poems that I wrote between February and May were the political type of stuff that showed up in Chief Jay Strongbow. Because I don't know if it's write what you know, but for poetry, it's like write what you're feeling. And I've always kind of been not turned off, but political poetry was never my favorite type of thing, much like...
More like rants for you, or?
Oh, well, much like, after a while, like on Facebook, you just get sick of people talking politics. And is it going to change people's mind? But write what you know and write what you feel. And this year, after the election, I could not help but write about some of the stuff that's been going on and how I felt about it. And I tried to present it in a unique way that wasn't a rant, that wasn't like, I hate this, and like, the poem like, bad, 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 Trump bad, 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 bad. I tried to, flush it out metaphorically. This is what it is, and do it in a poetic way versus a rantic way.
Very good. Now, do you think being the head of the Dyer series and having, you've had major league authors as well as beginners in there, and has this helped you as a writer? I mean, it can't but help you, right? Or
it helps me to
network. I know that.
To network, and it also helps me like just sitting back and hearing somebody that's really good, and just hearing the cadence. Very often, my writing has a lot to do with cadence.
I was speaking with Richard Hoffman, who is a very prominent writer. I'm sure you've had him at your series.
He's a musician as well.
He is?
Yeah.
And he talks about how much music is in writing. It has to have a musicality.
Exactly.
It's like a composition, a musical composition.
And having that, like I started writing short stories, and then with poetry I learned descriptiveness and more musicality, and I could, And the great thing about writing is little things you learn along the way, you apply to everything else. So it's just an extra tool in the toolbox.
Well, Tim, I think you've got some time, about 7 minutes or so, 8 minutes, to read from your book or whatever you want to read from. So why don't you let it rip?
Let it fly. Funny thing is, my poetry's been cleaned up a lot as well, and what ended up happening was I think there's one F word in the whole.
Yeah, I remember when you started out, there was much more.
In the whole book, and then when I read it at Boston Public Library, Harris yelled at me.
Oh yeah, well he yelled at a few people. Yeah.
This is a poem. A lot of my personal feelings about protests and nonviolent protests. I think they're good. Are they the most effective tool for society change? Well, history has kind of shown us differently. So here I wrote about. There's a poem about protests, and it's methinks we protest, and it's for the famous people Hannah Arendt, Malcolm X, Stalin, and Shakespeare.
Quite a crowd.
Methinks we protest and wake up to the same day, protest the same day. The most radical revolutions become conservative the day after the revolution. Take that out of your vocabulary if you're not ready to perish. For expression, you must perish. So you must say, F you, mother effer, confident so it won't burn your lips. Mother country cannot kiss those lips, and we cannot do this with silk gloves or insulated waterproof ski gloves. Make things warm and peaceful, possibly so that protests feel real. We really doth protest, much to do about marching and lighting candles. Marching and lighting candles. Complacent heroes seized by pepper spray, wilting like dirty little animals at night. Feel the darkness, feel the opposite of light, and wake up to the same day. Protest the same day. Of course, I found the one with the F word in it. And there we go. Throw certainty out the window, out in the air like a lasso. Reflections on Alton Sterling. Which is kind of interesting that Alton Sterling has appeared in the news again.
Alfred Sterling?
Alton Sterling was the young African-American man who was beaten in Louisiana.
So many, it's just so many stories.
The original kneeling for the national anthem by Reed and Kaepernick had to do reflecting upon this.
Okay.
Upon the Alton Sterling situation. And if you really look into it, it's sort of strange how that's sort of become paraded around for other things like the military and loving your country. And it's more about let's have some social change and have some fairness here. And it's a great article in the New York Times written by Reed, one of the original kneelers, saying like, we respect all you guys, but we just want things differently.
I feel I want to kneel now.
And kneel after the poem. Throw certainty out the window like a lasso. Reflections on Alton Sterling. Hatred is a deafening siren. Warnings of a terrible twister out there. It's only one. Earth tilled by a machine. We need topsoil, moisture, fertilizer to grow a single weed left bent. Throw questions out in the air like a lasso. Shady when the closed rope loosened. It's what we know of the truth. Chief Jay Strongbow is real. His war dance began when wounded. Desperate he'd rally, proud warrior. The show is real, damn it. The Native American comeback, always fighting, harder when down. Then full of fist chops, he'd punch handsome Jimmy Valiant. The rival's white hair was bloody and disheveled. Valiant was formerly a partner, and as champions, they fought Mr. Fuji and Professor Toru Tanaka, a tag team battle of racism. The bout was over when we enacted the Indian Removal Act, colonial conflict, disease, discrimination, because that was too real, damn it. The money's what it's all about. Value. Last year at Standing Rock, junior wrestler Delaney Lester won the 152-pound class in a pin, and no one will remember Delaney. And who was Luke Joseph Scarpa? He was a fake, an actor within the theater of our absurdity. It's all fake. Chief Jay Strongbow will beat the white man. That wrestler was, we look up Standing Rock High School. This Delaney Lester was a high school wrestler that won the state championship.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been trying to find the kid. You know, some random kid across the country has his name in a poem. I always wondered what that would be like a random high school kid and like someone in Massachusetts
Wrote a poem about you?
Yeah, exactly. I'll read the brushstroke poem because
That's a good one.
we referenced it.
Yeah.
If I can find it.
You know, you know, you're not afraid to talk about things and to let yourself bleed in the books a little. I've been, like I tell my creative writing students, nothing that's going to kill, you know, they're young, the 18, 19-year-olds, and I said, nothing's going to kill writing is if you're polite. I mean, sometimes you have to, you know, let a vein open a little.
And you also have to remember that if you're writing something, somebody's going to read it, whether it's a teacher or an audience or someone that's reading your book. So, I mean, you can really, if you go too day-to-day and too polite, it can really not capture the audience, and you really have to go there. Sobriety. It can exist. Drink coffee, milk, 3 sugars, stirred with a straw. Sit on a sofa, legs curled under, view the oil paintings, hung boats and fields, thousands of brushstrokes, thousands. I'm going to try to jump to... No, this is a found poem. Hopefully I can fit it in.
What is a found poem for those who don't know?
It's words or items. It's something that you kind of run into and you make a poem out of it. So this is when we talk about love, this is a found poem for Raymond Carver. I read a book review of Raymond Carver, and they took every single story in What Do We Talk About When We Talk About Love? I'm blanking on the title. But so I took words from this review, which covers, so every line or stanza is one of the stories of Carver in that book in sequence. When we talk about love, we talk about the wrong things. We talk about the other. Young girls we danced with, they must be desperate. Let me sell you something of yours. There's 13 steps you took, then became lukewarm. The best kind of love isn't regular. It is with a cleaning lady, a mailman. You want to see something? It's how you kill the slugs. It's how you plan to fly away into a negligent, non-existent role. In the future, you will go home to take a bath. We're all unconscious, unhappy enough to smash rocks over the heads of unwilling lovers, or denim-wearing cheaters at a bingo parlor. Did you clap when she cried out victorious? Did you drink whiskey and keep fishing when the body of a girl washed ashore? A dummy near the water built an electric fence to keep out thoughts.
Thank you very much, Tim.
And that broke in the middle.